If Ishii or any of his co-workers wanted a human brain, they would order a guard to find a useful sample. They would take the victim from his cell. The guards would hold him down while another guard takes an axe and bash his skull open. We all know about Hitler, Auschwitz, and the Nazi regime. What we don't get told is a World War I experiment that happened with the Japanese. This is known as Unit 731, and this is one of the most deadly and gruesome human experiments that ever happened in any world war. Alright, welcome back to my video. If you like this video, please like, subscribe. The more people subscribe, the more videos I'll make per week. Right now, I'm just making one video a week. So if you guys really like this type of content, these dark, mysterious, and true crime type content, please subscribe. I'll definitely make more a week, but right now I'm just doing once a week. And especially like the video because it does help the video get pushed to way more people. So please like. Unit 731 is notorious for the most war crimes ever committed by the Japanese armed forces. It routinely conducted tests on normal people, and they would call these people log. I'll go more into why they were calling these people logs. I don't know, maybe they're just weirdos, but I'll go more into that later in the story. But watch till the end because this story is very, very disturbing, and it gets kind of weird. You start to think to yourself, why are people like that? What's crazy is because some of the victims in these experiments came from different surrounding countries, with some of the victims even being pregnant women, even like little children, and even sometimes babies. Yeah, these kids were fucking weird. In the 1930s, Japan decided to build a facility known as Unit 731. Around this time, Japan was actually at war with China. It took over a part of China known as Manchuria, and this is where they would build Unit 731. The advantage of this is because now they have a research facility that's not on their island. So they would have test subjects from all different parts of this area, and it was usually Chinese test victims. So now because they're in China, they have all these Chinese test victims, which were even sometimes war prisoners, and if they feel like it, they would go to surrounding towns and just take victims just to test on. This research facility was actually used for biological and chemical warfare, and they were using this facility to give them an upper hand against other armed forces so they could have a great understanding of what the human body can intake and what the human body can resist. And the person in charge of this research facility was known as Shiro Ichi, and he made this facility because he was finding out that other powers were also doing chemical warfare. And he was very interested at the fact that German forces were using chlorine gas to take out their enemies. And he was actually very impressed that this chlorine gas and chemical warfare took out 5,000 to 15,000 allied forces. And this action alone would make him think, yes, I'm gonna start a facility where I start to test my own chemical warfare. And this is how the experimentation all begun. The test subjects were gathered from the surrounding areas and would sometimes be called logs. And in context, sometimes these doctors would actually ask other doctors like, how many logs have fell today? How many logs have you chopped today? Stuff like that would just give you an insight of like how they would see these people. The term actually originated as a joke for the staff members because the facility's cover was if they get busted, they would tell the authorities that this was just a lumber mill. And majority of these experiments were actually conducted just to see what the human body could endure. So just to give you guys reference, if a Japanese soldier is going to fight, with all these experiments being done, if they understand a good amount of what the human body can endure, they could have superior soldiers compared to other militaries that aren't doing the same experiment. The staff would actually use very gruesome tactics to get specific body parts from these victims. If Ishii or any of his co-workers wanted a human brain, they would order a guard to find a useful sample. They would take the victim from his cell. The guards would hold him down while another guard takes an axe and bash his skull open. They would extract the brain and then burn his body. And they would actually take people that are studying medicine in college to this facility. And while these students were actually in the facility, they would see some of the most gruesome and disturbing things they've ever seen. One of the students would actually testify about how playful these doctors and staff members were with these prisoners. He would actually be recalled as saying, some of the experiments have nothing to do with advancing the capability of germ warfare or of medicine. There is such thing as professional curiosity. What would happen if we did such and such? What medical purpose was served by performing and studying beheadings? None at all. That was just playing around. Professional people too like to play. And now let's go to one of the testing that this facility actually did, known as frostbite testing. What the Japanese people would do would take some of these prisoners outside in freezing temperatures, dip their body parts like their arm, their legs into freezing cold water, wait till it's frozen, and by the way, they would know that it's frozen because they would take a wooden stick, hit it against their arm, and if it gives the sound of another wood being hit, then that's how they would know that it's completely frozen. And then after their arms or body parts froze, they would sometimes throw really hot water on these prisoners to see what would happen. Some of the prisoners died because of these really cold temperatures. And what they also found is that the temperatures between 100 to 122 degrees Fahrenheit would be the perfect temperature to demelt some of the frozen body parts. Or sometimes they would actually put them in really hot furnace-like places to see how fast it could melt away the frozen body part. Weapons testing. They would take prisoners from their cells, tie them up on poles, and put them in a specific area on the field. They would put them in various positions, throw grenades just to see the blast radius and how much damage the grenade did from that distance. And they would do the same things with guns and even flamethrowers. And there was this one instance where once they actually threw a chemical bomb, but the winds was so strong that it actually came back into the Japanese army and they all ran. And the same sort of testing would be done with knives and even bayonets. Syphilis. So this was one of the diseases that the Japanese actually cared about the most. So sometimes they would actually inject some of the prisoners with this virus to see what it does, or even infect the male subjects and allow the male subjects to violate these women to see the results of this disease. But after the victim was infected, they would actually vivisect that person to see what damage this disease did to their body. There would actually be vivisection at different stages of the disease to see what the disease did to the external and internal parts of their body. That leads us into the most disturbing experiment that they would conduct, and this was known as vivisection. Thousands of men, women, children, and even babies were conducted to vivisection. Oftentimes, this would be performed with no anesthesia or any sort of sedatives. They would usually just put a rag inside that person's mouth and listen to them scream to them. Vivisections were actually performed on people just to wash diseases. Or sometimes they would actually take their body parts, or sometimes they would actually vivisect these people just to see their organs. Researchers would actually perform invasive surgeries on these prisoners. They wanted to see what the disease did to their organs, so by cutting them open, they could get a first-hand glimpse of what was happening inside these people's bodies. Prisoners would have limbs removed just to see the blood loss. They would even have their limbs reattached to different sides of their bodies. It was one of the weirdest experiments. Some prisoners even have their stomach and esophagus removed, and they would even put their esophagus sometimes in their stomach. They would even remove their brain, their liver, their heart. And one of the researchers there even said that sometimes when they performed these actions, they weren't actually even performing to see what was going on inside the person's body. They were just performing for practice. He was even saying that some of these practices were actually just routines for them. A former Japanese assistant from 731 would actually depict what it was like doing these vivisections. This victim was deliberately infected with the plague for the purpose of developing plague bombs for war. The former Japanese assistant would say this: "The fellow knew that it was over for him, and so he didn't struggle when they led him into the room and tied him down. But when I picked up the scalpel, that's when he began screaming. I cut him open from chest to stomach, and he screamed terribly, and his face was all twisted in agony. He made this unimaginable sound. He was screaming so horribly, but then finally it stopped. This was all in a day's work for the surgeons. But it really left an impression on me because it was my first time." And this goes to show you that every surgeon was actually used to hearing these sounds. But that wasn't the only experiment. There was many other experiments that were also conducted in this camp. In other tests, subjects were deprived of food and water to determine the length of time until death, placed into low pressure chambers until their eyes popped from their sockets, experimented upon to determine the relationship between temperature, burns, and human survival, hung upside down until death, crushed with heavy objects. They were also electrocuted. They also were dehydrated with hot fans, placed into centrifuges, and spun until death, injected with animal blood, notably with horse blood, exposed to lethal doses of of X-ray, subjected to various chemical weapon inside gas chambers, injected with seawater, and be burnt or buried alive. With World War I coming to an end, now in 1945, the Red Army was coming to take over. Now the units in the facilities all had to be abandoned. The ministries in Tokyo would say that every single incriminating detail needs to be gone. 300 prisoners at this experimental facility would be taken and killed. All of them either died by getting gassed, eating poison, or injected with poison. Ishii ordered every member of the research group to vanish and take every single cent of this experiment to the grave with them. And just in case they were captured, he would actually give them potassium cyanide to take so that they wouldn't be forced or even tortured to tell any of the secrets. The final crew of 731 would come in, blow up all evidence and any sort of building remains that were left. But not everything could be destroyed because these buildings were actually really sturdy, so there was small traces of this facility that was still remained. Also, comment your thoughts down below on this experiment. What would you do if you actually were in this experimental facility, if you could even do anything at all? And that is the end of Unit 731. If you guys like this video, please like the video. Like, actually like the video. It helps me a lot. So if you guys like the video, please like it, please subscribe, and watch my other videos. Thank you so much, and expect another video next week. Love you all. Thank you. Bye.